I don't wanna hear the lies. Why so many fall for the left side? Everybody needs to realize this world will fall if we don't fight. Wake up, America. Wake up, wake up, wake up. Wake up, America. Wake up, wake up, wake up.
What's going on, everybody? I wasn't going to do a live stream, but I figured I'd do it anyway to give an update on what's going on in California. There was a mass shooting this morning around 6:30 in the morning at the VTA terminal. It's a place where buses and subway trains are kept. And apparently, from what we know, it's apparent that a either current or former VTA employee opened fire, killing 8 other people. It's rather weird in terms of news and what's going on, because the mainstream media is reporting that there's a fire currently at the alleged suspect's home, and they've recovered gasoline and they've recovered ammo and stuff. But apparently the fire department is battling a house fire at the home of the apparent suspect in the shooting, which is rather odd. You typically don't see that. It's kind of reminiscent of what happened a couple of weeks ago in Maryland, where the gunman he lit his own house on fire, and then as people were fleeing the houses next door and in his neighborhood, he executed them. And I think he killed 4 people before he was killed by police. This incident's a little different. One of the reasons why I wanted to just come on is I've been watching all the news. I was just listening to ABC News. They had a congressperson, I believe, from California, maybe a state rep. I didn't recognize or Representative Ro Khanna. And maybe that's not who was speaking before. I don't even know. It was somebody before. And they were talking about all the information they don't have and passing it off as fact. So for anyone that's unaware, when you have a mass shooting, it takes a while before you find out information, unless you're in D.C. Remember, in D.C., there was the terrorist attack at the Capitol after January 6th. Everyone wants to just pretend that was the only one. But we had a terrorist attack where a man drove his vehicle into 2 U.S. Capitol police officers, killing one before he was gunned down by one of the police officers that was injured when he was charging at them with a knife. That's what a lot of people don't realize is within a half an hour of that incident, the acting police chief for the U.S. Capitol Police came out and said it wasn't terror related, which made everybody with a brain say, well, this is terror related, because even before the suspect's name is released, they say it's not terror related. They didn't do any investigation or anything. This shooting in California, we don't know anything about it. We don't know what kind of gun he used. We don't know if it was a high capacity magazine. We don't know if it was a rifle. We don't know anything. We don't know if he was legally able to own the gun. They've done a pretty good job of keeping it at wraps on who this guy is so far, at least that I've been able to find. And yet everyone's talking about gun control and all that same stuff, everything that they typically do. Joe Biden released a statement through the press conference, or the press lady that's subbing in for Jen Psaki today, and it said he was mourning the loss of these people, and this is just another reason why gun control needs to be enacted, and blah blah blah. California already has very strict gun control regulations. I know nothing about what actually happened here, but I could probably say that if the guy did legally possess a weapon, I'd be surprised. We don't know, ultimately, but everyone's talking about how he did. And I got to give credit to where credit's due. The ABC commentator here on the ABC News special report, she actually called out the congressperson who was speaking about gun reform and the fact that, large caliber or large, velocity guns, because of how quick this guy was apparently shooting, even though he said he didn't have any reports that they were shooting quickly, that they just need to be banned and all this stuff. And she pointedly asked, well, do you know anything about what kind of gun he was using? Do you know? And he had to say no, because ultimately nobody knows. They haven't released any of the information. The only thing we know now is it's confirmed that the deceased shooter was a VTA employee. We know that. We know there's a fire at his home. They're at his home now. And they're trying to that they're trying to figure out what's going on. The scene is still not clear of the mass shooting because they're actually sweeping for bombs based on the information they found at his home from what I'm able to gather. So it's a very fluid situation. I hate using that too, but it is. I mean, there's no other way to describe what's going on there. But I implore everyone not to rush. I mean, everyone's going to do it anyway. I'm sure CNN has got this video playing on repeat of everything, and they're probably, talking about gun control and gun this and gun that. The police, and it looks like maybe a SWAT team is at the home of this alleged or not alleged suspect. The police have identified him as the suspect in the shooting, and they're currently at his home. Again, we saw some reports that there was fire. There was a fire at his home, so I don't really know anything other than what I just told you, but I wanted to get on here because I feel like it's my civic duty to warn everybody when you're watching, news coverage. They don't know. The police have not released anything regarding what kind of weapon was used. They haven't released anything on whether this guy legally possessed a gun. They haven't even released anything about his identity other to say that he was a VTA employee. And it doesn't say former employee either, so there must have been some sort of dispute, and then he lost his cool and came in. We don't know if he was a white dude. We don't know if he was anything else in regards to it. And I suspect we'll know very quickly. And the way we'll find out is media will stop covering it if it doesn't fit the narrative. So if it's someone that had an illegal gun and it happens not to be a white dude, the media, as we've seen time and time again, this isn't just me blowing smoke, the media will just stop covering it, pretending like it didn't happen. Just saying, oh, it's very tragic, we lost these lives, but it has nothing. There's nothing we can do about it, or even better, they'll just blame it on white supremacy anyway, because that's what they do virtually for everything. I also wanted to talk real quick about Portland because I didn't do a good enough job talking about it this morning. For anyone that doesn't know, all the people that have been arrested during the Capitol riot, again, not calling it an insurrection because it doesn't meet the definition of an insurrection. All the people that were arrested, or the majority of them, excluding John Sullivan and a few others that have had their charges dropped, and surprisingly, are all left-leaning people. I haven't found anybody else that's had charges dropped that or released without bail that aren't left-leaning people. There was an Antifa transgendered person that was arrested. I believe they were caught in a vehicle after self-admitting that they were at the Capitol, and they got pepper sprayed by these Trump supporters that were arrested, and they had a gun in the backpack. Now, they were arrested, held for a couple of days, and then all their charges were dropped. Very weird that one of the only guns that was recovered on Capitol property, they released the person that had that firearm. Kind of weird, right? But again, not something mainstream media picks up on, not something that mainstream media wants to talk about. John Sullivan, obviously, we've talked about him ad nauseum. He is currently out on bail, or out without having to put up any bail after facing 8 charges, including lying to FBI agents. He is the one, if you've seen the footage of Ashley Babbitt being murdered by the Capitol police officer as she tried to climb through the window from approximately 20, 30 feet away. He was that footage that you watched. It was the footage that John Sullivan captured. He's an Antifa BLM terrorist. You may remember him from September of 2020 when he stood up on a concrete barrier outside of the White House, threatening to drag the president out of the White House, saying we can't wait till the election. Or you may remember him from his June 22 arrest, or June arrest in 2020 for a protest turned violent when a gunman opened fire, shooting a civilian that was just trying to drive through while they blocked the roads. Yeah, he was arrested for that because he's the one that orchestrated that BLM protest. Now, we've been following John Sullivan for a long time. I've talked to his family, talked to his brother, his dad. I've talked to employers. I've talked to previous contractors that he worked with. I've talked to his videographer. I've talked to his, everybody. Regarding this guy, and the one thing I can't figure out is who's the puppeteer. Because if any of you guys have paid attention to John Sullivan, he's not very bright. Someone else is pulling those strings and is putting all these things into motion, which is very frightening when you actually think about, just what he's done. and how far he's been able to get. They were literally making a documentary from him, and a production company that was involved in that documentary is a very famous production company. And the people that are involved in the book deal, and even, I mean, anyone that wants to do some fun investigation, look into the person that was making the documentary about it, Jade Sacker. Look at her familial connections to Hollywood and to the Democratic Party. Look at all that stuff. It's very interesting. And Jade Sacker, even though she lied to me, she seems relatively honest. I'm not going to put myself out there too much, but I have talked to her, and I thought originally I believed her based on what she told me. And then it turns out, no, she's kissing him while they both broke into the Capitol together. Weird. And it's just a very weird situation. And the reason why I'm talking about it is because we all know what's happening to those people that are being arrested and charged with the insurrection or the riot in D.C., right? Granted, it's a crime. Nobody's arguing the fact, or I at least am not. I'm not apologizing for the fact that these people are in jail because they committed crimes. They should be in jail, especially if you believe in something and it's an honorable cause to you. You would think that you wouldn't run from it or hide from it, but you would expect, especially these people that believe in our justice system in our country, you would think that they would expect to have some sort of decency when they are, being privy to the justice system, when they're being part of it. Instead, they're being kept on 23-hour lockdowns in D.C. They're at least one person has cancer and is not getting the appropriate treatment. Some of them aren't allowed phone calls. Some of them aren't allowed to go out and exercise. There's a bunch of them have failing health problems. And here's the question, and this is what I just asked someone on Twitter, which kind of prompted me to think about this. For all the left-leaning people, and I would appreciate you guys, if you're watching this on YouTube after, well, first off, to share this and like it and do all that stuff that you do on social media. But if you're watching this on YouTube after, leave a comment to this specific question. Do you think that the people in Portland, Oregon last night that attempted to burn a federal building, literally tried to set it on fire while people were inside it and attacked federal police officers along with local and state police officers, do you think that those people should be treated any differently than what happened at the Capitol? Do you think that the FBI should use the same amount of resources that they're using to track down people that were at the Capitol? Again, I got to go back to the incident in New York where the FBI used a SWAT team in flashbangs at 5 o'clock in the morning to raid the home of a man that walked through open doors at the Capitol, was captured on video, not doing anything except walking through and videoing. He's not charged with assaulting police. He's not charged with vandalizing. He's not charged with anything excluding walking in and protesting at the Capitol. Do you think that the FBI and federal resources has spent the amount of time that they're spending? They surveilled this New York guy for weeks. On 3 separate occurrences, they had multiple FBI agents sitting outside his business. It's in the actual complaint. It's absurd what we're spending money on. But then again, it is. But do you think that the FBI should be spending the same amount of resources going after each and every single person that was involved in the insurrection of a federal courthouse yesterday in Portland and early into this morning? I do, and that's my belief. I don't think there's anything different. If you want to look at on a scale of violence between the two, I would say what happened last night in Portland was much, 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 much more violent than what happened at the Capitol. That's just my opinion based on what I watched. Yeah, I mean, what happened at the Capitol was still violent and a shame and a scourge on our democracy and all that, which I agree with. I think it was. I think it hurt the Republican Party. I think it hurt conservatives. I think it hurt America. There's no way. I'm not going to apologize for the way I feel about it. That is how I feel. But how come they're not treating what happened in Portland last night the same way? How come they don't treat the woman that stood in the intersection in Kansas City yesterday, threatening to knock on the doors of cops and shoot them in the head? How come they're not treating that with the same regard? How come they're not treating the people that blocked the Brooklyn Bridge yesterday, and when people tried to get them to move, they assaulted them? How come they're not all treating them the same? Isn't that the same thing? Isn't that a crime? Aren't they committing crimes? Aren't they attacking our democracy? Isn't blocking a road in blocking interstate commerce, which is a violation of the Hobbs Act, a federal felony? How come nobody is going after that? Now we saw, and I think you could take a handful of the people that were arrested by federal authorities for the riots over 2020. I guarantee there's been more people arrested at the Capitol for the January 6th riot than there have been by people that have been indicted by a federal grand jury for the violence and riots and deaths that have been committed in 2020 since the riots started when George Floyd was killed. Again, those are really basic questions, and I think they deserve an answer. You know, that's the premise of why we do this, is to cause you to think and just be like, hey, what is the difference? And I would encourage all of you guys, if you're on Twitter, you know, as much as I hate Twitter, I'm actually on it a lot, and I interact with it a lot, and it's growing on me, to be honest. So if you don't follow me on Twitter, you probably should, because we put a lot of news out there that we just don't write, or we don't select to write for a news article because we just don't have the time. But I encourage you, if you're on Twitter, anyone who mentions the insurrection, ask what happened last night in Portland. Do they consider that the same thing? Should the FBI go after the people in Portland with the same veracity that they went after all the people in the Capitol and continue to do so today? Heck, I know people that have had the FBI show up at their door and they never even left their state just because someone called them. Just because someone called and said this person was here, rather than just do due diligence and like look online to see if someone was actually in their state. No, they go and waste all of our tax money and tax resources to send 2 FBI agents to someone's house. I mean, what is going on here? And anyone that wants to say it's not political, I mean, you're lying to yourself. But I encourage everybody to ask. I'm not reading the comments or anything right now, but I encourage everybody to ask and to engage the people on social media, and not do it in a disrespectful way, because that's not the premise of what we're trying to build here. We want people to be comfortable enough to ask people and say, hey, here's a real question. What is going on? Why is what happened last night in Portland different? And then have that conversation back and forth. And again, you're going to get people that are trolls, but do it. We can start our own little thing. I got over 1,000 people watching right now. There's no reason why 10 of you, 1%, can't just get someone else to engage in a positive way, or even if it's not positive, enlighten somebody else. And then because those 10 may later on do it to somebody else or do it to somebody else. So I'm curious about that. Anyway, back to the breaking news story of the day. Deceased suspect was a VTA employee. 8 victims killed in a mass shooting in San Jose, California rail yard. Again, no other information's available. Mainstream media is already pushing the anti-gun narrative when nobody has any idea what kind of gun was being used, whether it was a rifle or handgun, whether it was legally owned. There's no suspect information. We don't know if it was a white guy. We don't know if it was a minority or person of color that did the shooting. We won't know, and probably what we'll realize, and it sucks to even say it, but you guys, for the majority of you, it's true. When we do find out who the shooter was or what the nationality of the shooter in California was, we're not really, it's either 1, media is going to pounce on it, or 2, they're going to stop covering it. It's the same thing with the Atlanta shootings. And I keep saying this all the time. The Atlanta shootings, remember there were 6 Asian women that were killed at the spas in Atlanta? The problem with that, what the problem with that shooting, besides the shooting itself? There were 8 people that were killed, not 6. Mainstream media reported 6 Asian people killed. Forgot about the 2 white people that were killed as well, and the Spanish guy that was shot outside of the store. They just pretend like it doesn't exist. And we see that a lot. Remember the Colorado mass shooting that took place at the grocery store? They stopped covering as soon as it found out the guy was from Syria. They stopped covering, and he was an American. Well, I don't know his residency status, but he had been in America since he's 3. But the second they found out it wasn't a white dude, they stopped. Same thing with the D.C. terror attack on the Capitol that happened a couple of months ago, after January 6th. They literally, I remember watching, I think we were broadcasting it live, but I wasn't showing the footage, and it showed a live feed from a helicopter where it showed the patient being moved on a stretcher, and they're working on him. They're doing CPR, and he was a shooter. I remember the whole tone. Everything stopped. As soon as they saw that suspect was not a white redneck Trump supporting wearing guy, They stopped talking about it. The coverage died within, by that night, they didn't even talk about it. And then when you actually look into the guy that attacked the Capitol and killed the actual police officer, the Capitol police officer, turns out he was a Nation of Islam follower, anti-cop, it's crazy. But again, that's the problem with media, and that's what we're looking to change and really change, I guess, is the easiest way to say it. I don't know any other way to say it. That's what we're trying to do, is just change the way news is reported, change the way people receive things, and hopefully, people are honest. There's a guy out here that's waiting to hear, on the news broadcast I'm watching. I can't play the audio because it's not a syndicated feed. But people are outside of San Jose and they're just waiting to talk to their families. They don't even know. But I don't know. I mean, I don't know how police protocol works. Do they release a number of victims before they get in touch with the victims' families? I really don't know. But it's interesting. It's interesting to talk about. It's interesting to think about when you look from a bigger picture. And here's a good example. If all of you kind of just refresh and pretend like you're just waking up and you're looking at the news and you're listening to what's been said, based on having the information that we have so far, which is very little, why is the talking points always revert back to gun control? Why is it about what kind of weapon this guy used? Why isn't it about what is actually going on and what causes people to go and do this kind of nutty stuff? In fact, and if it turns out the guy was illegally possessing a gun, why will the investigation likely go away or just stop covering it? We write about mass shootings every Friday, typically. We haven't for 2 weeks. Last week, we wrote one on Monday. And this weekend, I'm traveling, so I probably won't write one unless I do it Sunday in Virginia. But we write about those a lot, and because we want to bring attention to it. There were 14 mass shootings in a 72-hour period this weekend. You only heard about a couple of them. And you heard about a couple of them only for a couple hours. There was a shooting at a nightclub in North Carolina. There was a shooting at a nightclub in Minneapolis. You heard about it just for a second, and then it faded off into obscurity. Whereas, remember the shootings, like the Atlanta shooting, everyone still talks about it. They say it's race-related and a hate crime, except even the police and the investigators and GBI and everybody said there was nothing to do with race. The guy was a sexual deviant. Had nothing to do with race whatsoever. They didn't even look at the bigger picture in saying that it was a sexual addiction and would cause a person to do all this stuff in the first place. Then why aren't they? How come all the left-leaning people, or everybody, not even left-leaning, but how come everybody isn't analyzing the sex trade that's currently taking place in Georgia and the fact that these places are even operational and known to police? Shouldn't that be something that people investigate? But instead, no, it's just it's pretending that this is something it's not. And we see that a lot. We see it a lot. Look at the Colorado shooting, the one that happened at the grocery store. The name escapes me right now. But think about that. Think about how we covered it and mainstream media covered it. Everybody covered it. And it was in the news for like a day or two until the suspect information was released. They really, really picked up the coverage as soon as they saw that it looked like a fat, white, balding guy that came out. That was a very stereotypical, thing. And then it turns out he was a Syrian refugee. And they stopped talking about it. And it faded off from the news, and people don't even reference it anymore. Mainstream media yesterday was a 1-year anniversary of when George Floyd died. Today is the anniversary of when everyone started killing each other as a response. And I'm not being honest. I am being honest. Today is the anniversary of the past year of people causing $2 billion worth of damage to our country, and people dying, and people living in fear, and people getting shot at. This is where it all started. A year ago today is when all the riots began. Minneapolis burned, and the police station had people shooting into it with AK-47s. Yeah. Everyone wanted to just say, oh, yesterday was the anniversary. I don't think of it as an anniversary of a guy dying. As tragic as it may have been, I think of it as the beginning of what we're going to now be forced to remember over the next year. And you know what? In the next week or so, I am going to put out a 40-minute compilation or 45-minute compilation of each and every single day's riots. We are going to work on that because I think it's very important so you understand what actually happened in the past year. Oh yeah, there's been a big push for social change and for this, and so everyone's important, and so we can remember that the racism is alive and well in the United States, and everybody, if you're white and you have a beard and you disagree with the whole premise that one person's life, depending on their skin color, is more important than somebody else, then you must and you are a racist. Well, I want to show you how we got there. Mainstream media is not going to do it. So I'm going to work on a mini documentary over the next week or two, and I'm going to put it out there so you guys all can see what actually happened each and every day, the interviews, the people that died. You know, there was one guy, I wrote a story on it last year before we got into the whole political side where we're still in trucking. One guy was dragged underneath a fifth wheel that they were or underneath the rear tandems of a tandem trailer, FedEx trailer, as they were trying to loot it. And the driver got so scared because people are banging on the doors with guns that he just gassed it and said, screw this, I'm not going to die. I'm not going to be a victim. He drove away. He dragged one guy, killing him. He dragged him 3 blocks. In Tulsa, Oklahoma, there's a guy sitting in the middle of traffic while they stopped the traffic in the middle of the road on an interstate. He's sitting there with his family. He's got his horses in the back, and his wife and kids are in the car. Protesters start attacking his vehicle. He pulls a gun, puts it on the dashboard to try to scare these people away to protect his kids. They don't do it. They start beating on his vehicle. He makes a determination. He's not going to shoot them. He's going to drive. 2 of them are severely injured. That guy, they tried to get him arrested. They tried to charge him. They burned one of his horses. They threw a Molotov cocktail into his trailer. That kind of stuff they don't talk about. But yeah, we're going to talk about every single person that is killed by police while resisting arrest or concealing drugs or whatever. And we're not going to talk about the 8-year-old Sequoia Turners of the world that are killed by the very same people that are protesting that Black Lives Matter are killing black people. Isn't that just really weird, huh? For some reason, our country doesn't feel like following those things. It doesn't feel like that's the level of importance. And it's mind-boggling to me, you know? But the only thing we can do here at PT News, Citizen, Stringer, whatever we're doing, is the only way we can, impress upon you guys to do your own research and find out what's really going on in this country is by doing what we're doing now. And showing you and potentially just giving you the ability to pay attention to what's going on and figure out, okay, well, what direction is it? What direction am I going to go in what I believe today? It's frustrating, man. What's going on in this country right now is definitely a scary thing, and everyone needs to wake up. That's why my evening show is called Wake Up America, because if we don't, we're just waiting. It's hopeless. And I mean that. If we don't wake up soon, we are all effed. Because no matter what, we're going to hit that point of where it's too late. We're beyond repair. I got a couple of emails a couple of days ago from 2 different people on different sides of the country, don't know each other, never met me, never really talked to me except for watching this show. And they are both now on different committees and boards in their community, and they sent me emails to thank me, to say, hey, this is the first step. You were right. We listened to you. Here's the first step. And people are starting to do it. People are starting to go out and run for office and run for those little boards or apply to be on these boards. Because if you guys are in a medium-sized town right now or city, I guarantee there's board vacancies. It may not be on the best board, but I can guarantee there are board vacancies where you can affect change in your community. Whether it's a recreation board, rent leveling board, transportation board, there's some way for you to get involved politically in your town. And unless you want to do it, and again, it doesn't matter whether you're Democrat or Republican, I could care less. The only thing I think is that we have to find a way to affect change, whether we think change, for the bigger picture at the end. I'm jumping around a lot in what I'm saying, but it's kind of like, my wife and I, we're polar opposites in everything virtually. She's a liberal. I'm a very conservative guy. She's a teacher, believes in all that holistic bullshit. I don't. She likes Sublime. I hate them. We have the same focus, though. Our long-term goal for our country is the same. And the reason is because we think of it from our kids' eyes and their children's eyes. And we want our kids to live in a world where they're able to be successful and prosper. You know, my wife is definitely not a socialist and she doesn't believe that way, but we have the same things. Granted, she disagrees, you know, a lot of times, like if I try to talk about certain things, like especially in the education system that I think are wrong, she'll just try to argue it because it's almost like it's built in. You know, she has a master's degree now, so she is smarter than everybody. So she'll argue about certain things. And I'm like, hey, at some point, you don't need to overanalyze everything. You just got to let common sense, kick in. And my new go-to is I'm like, listen, imagine our kids are in that class. Would you want them being taught that? And it was remember last week I did the whole drag queen, children's book story. Remember that? So I asked my wife that question. And she's like, well, what's it matter? What's the difference? Who cares who's reading a book? You think that how is that wrong? And I said, you wouldn't be offended if our kids did that, or our kids, had to sit through that kind of, drag queens, swish, hips go swish, 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 and shit like that. And she's like, no, it wouldn't offend me. And I said, okay, so would a guy wearing, a crop top fishnet shirt that's walking in there talking about how he swings his nipple tassels around, would that offend you? And she's like, yeah. And I said, so what the hell's the difference? They're both weird. You know what I mean? It's both personal preference, but why are we subjecting kids to it? And it goes on to so much more stuff. I mean, if you guys, I probably lost you if you didn't know what I was talking about with the whole drag queen story time with PBS and New York City's Department of Education. Look that up, because that's some frightening stuff. I am definitely not playing that video again. I can't deal with it myself. But I don't know. It's just something. I wanted to just make a quick live video and just remind everybody, when you're watching mainstream media, don't believe it. Don't believe anything I just said either. What I like to do is say something and make you question it, whether you agree or not, but make you look into it more. That's the way I want to write our articles. That's the way I want shows to go. I want it to cause you to be like, Steve said that thing. Is he right or is he wrong? It's like yesterday. Someone's like, I made a comment on Twitter about the LAPD defunding their police, and then private companies are willing to pick up the slack, and everyone's jumping on them for it and doing big investigations into them. And so I made a mention of, it's funny that they slash their budgets, and then these companies are willing to help, and they're getting vilified by the same people who chastised the police department, so much so that they defunded $150 million. And one person's like, well, the LAPD budget is $3.7 million or $1 billion. You don't think that's enough to cut out? And I'm like, actually, it's $1.86 billion. You're looking at the entire budget, which isn't just the police department. But that, again, those are very specific things that you're not going to know. And those arguments go a long way when they're all compounded together. I don't know. Probably just went off on too much of a tangent for you. In the description of this video, you guys will see a link for anyone that's just watching for the first time. My name is Steve. I own PT News. The show is sponsored by SpartanArmorSystems.com. Visit them at SpartanArmorSystems.com and use code YEET, and you get 10% off your body armor order, and you should get it quickly before it's sold out. Anyway, we are rebranding our whole outfit here. All the podcasts, all the the shows we do, the website. We are rebranding it under one new network, essentially under Citizen Stringer. And the reason why we're doing it is because we want to make this more of a community crowdsourcing the news, I guess is the easiest way to say it. So I want you guys to write news and to write news articles, and you guys to, make these little videos, not this long, but 2 minutes or 5 minute videos where you're talking about a subject that matters to you, not necessarily for distribution elsewhere on the show or something, although we'll be doing contests and stuff, but more of so people can look. Imagine like a TikTok, but just for news and opinions. We are creating that. We're creating a platform where people can go and cover different events and sell their footage and photos and things like that. So if you guys want to be a part of that, go down in the link in the description on Facebook and YouTube, or just go to my Twitter page. You'll see them on there. There's a link for an Indiegogo. Which we're crowdsourcing the app development and everything on this. We're going to do it regardless. I have the capital to do it. My wife would rather me not spend all my money doing it because it is a communal thing, and I'm not going to make a ton of money. I'm not going to get rich off of it. So she wants me to, try to, it's a community. I mean, we're crowdsourcing the news, so why not crowdsource the funds for it? So that's our goal in the long run. So you guys can find the link. I'm not going to spam the chat with the link because I don't have it handy and I'm not even logged into the chat. I just wanted to give a quick update about what was going on out there in San Jose. Again, 8 people are dead and the shooter. So 9 people total are dead after a gunman walked into a VTA like rail yard in San Jose, California around 6:30 this morning and opened fire. Police and fire are battling a fire at his home now, at the home of the suspected shooter. They haven't said whether it's a male or female. And apparently they found ammo and gasoline, and they're still searching the VTA building for explosives, potentially because of what they found in the home. I'm not quite sure. But I just wanted to give you guys an update and kind of rant a little bit. I appreciate everyone for being here. There will be no show tonight, no show tomorrow night, but I'll probably do a news update in the morning before I tear all this stuff down and then do the final load into the trailer. I'll do an update when I go up. I thought about trying to do some sort of like fundraiser, or giveaways or something like that. To raise, the Indiegogo funds. And I may try to figure out something for the next week, starting on Friday morning. I'm going to be driving essentially for the entire week, because I'm moving to Virginia. Then I got to come back down here, get my family, get the trailer or the travel trailer. Then we're moving up. And plus my mother just bought a house. So I'm actually going to help her move in the middle of all of it because I'm such a nice guy. So I'm going to be all over the place. But I'll pop in and do news updates, and April's going to be writing articles left and right, and Quincy and Adam and Scott will still be doing their regular shows. So I appreciate everyone for watching. I will be live for another news update, or just the news, whatever you want to call it, tomorrow at some point. Till then, see you later. Bye. Shout out to Loza.